Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I'm Akandayo, and today we're unpacking a really fascinating and frankly massive shift in Nigeria's security structures. We're going to be looking at a policy document anchored by Princess Adejoke Orolupe Adefulere OFR. We're strictly diving into what the text actually says about devolving power and what that ultimately means for accountability. Okay, let's just run through our agenda real quick. First, the ghost of Aburi. Second, the big security shift. Third, forest guards and state police. Fourth, the average citizen's reality. Fifth, accountability at state houses. And finally, number 6, the new security structure. Let's dive in.
Section 1, the ghost of Aburi, a 59-year decentralization promise. To really understand where Nigerian security is heading today, we actually need to start with a bit of a ghost story from the past.
So cast your mind back to January 1967. Nigeria's leaders met at Aburi in Ghana. The core agreement they hammered out? Decentralization, literally putting security closer to the people. But here is the wild part. For 59 years, that idea was just kind of lingering. It was debated, sure, but ultimately abandoned. It wasn't until exactly 3 years ago that the current administration took that lingering spirit of Aburi and finally started implementing it as actual, on-the-ground structural policy. Now, you might be wondering, why the sudden shift? Well, under the old, heavily centralized system, the federal government basically became the default scapegoat. As the text states, every attack, abduction, or breach was blamed on Abuja. And practically speaking, that meant local crises in really remote wards were left just waiting around for a distant federal response. It just wasn't working. Section 2, the big security shift, from federal-centric to state-led. So let's pivot from that historical context and look at the specific modern policy shifts. The contrast here is absolutely massive. On one hand, you've got the old way, right? A highly federal-centric mindset that relies heavily on centralized military barracks. In that setup, Abuja bears all the frontline responsibility. But on the other hand, we have the new way, outlined in the Renewed Hope Doctrine. This is a state-led approach driven by localized intelligence. Under this new model, governors act as chief security officers, in actual practice, not just in title.
The text defines this new reality as regional security structures. What does that mean? It means localized security planning, intelligence gathering, and rapid response are now led directly by the states and the geopolitical zones. It's basically Aburi's regional autonomy in action, transferring that operational control completely out of the capital and right into local hands.
Section 3, forest guards and state police, tangible deployments on the ground. You know, high-level concepts are great and all, but this document gives us some very specific, tangible examples of decentralization. 1,000. That's a really important number here, because that is the specific number of forest guards the text says are approved and rolling out per state right now. Since forest reserves have long been used as hideouts by bandits and kidnappers, it is now the direct, frontline responsibility of state governments to clear, patrol, and secure them, not Abuja, the states. And alongside those guards, the state police framework is also advancing. These forces are going to be under the direct command of state governors. They'll be trained specifically for their own local terrain, and they'll be embedded directly within their native language and community. According to the document, this is that 1967 Aburi vision of localized law enforcement finally coming to life. Section 4, the average citizen's reality. What decentralization means for you. Let's bring these high-level governance changes down from the state house and directly into your neighborhood. Because it forces us to ask a really practical question, doesn't it? What does this structural shift actually mean for your neighborhood's safety? How does this massive transfer of power impact the everyday lived reality of an average Nigerian just trying to keep their family secure? Well, it builds a brand new, immediate chain of accountability. Think about it like this. If kidnappers are operating in state forests, the governor now answers for that. If local vigilantes are inactive, the local government area chairman is on the hook. And if community security is dormant while families are threatened, local ward leaders must answer. The accountability is pushed directly to the leaders living right next door to you. Section 5, accountability at state houses. A warning to political saboteurs. The document doesn't just outline policy, actually. It delivers a very stern political message. The text includes a pretty stark warning to political actors who might sponsor chaos. It says, and I quote, "If you would like to continue kidnapping your people, thinking you're fighting his re-election, you are only exposing yourself. The document impartially points out that because local leaders now own the security budgets and the intelligence, any failure to protect lives can no longer just be blamed on federal negligence. So the crucial takeaway here is this new expectation. The text says Nigerians are now going to start asking their governors, what did you do with the Aburi powers given to you? The whole doctrine really demands that citizens hold their local leaders fully accountable for the budgets they now possess. Section 6, the new security structure. The renewed hope doctrine breakdown. To wrap this all up, let's map out the final three-tiered security architecture. Here is exactly how the new ecosystem breaks down. Up at the top tier, the federal level focuses on national policy. They provide the air power, the special forces, the funding, and handle interstate threats. Moving down to the state tier, they are the ones leading frontline operations, commanding the forest guards and securing highways and schools. And finally, the LGA and ward tier owns grassroots intelligence, local vigilante mobilization, and early warning systems. So the federal government has essentially transitioned into a support role for the frontline states. The core thesis of this entire document really just boils down to this. Power moved from federal barracks to state forests. It represents an absolute, undeniable transfer of operational responsibility. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought derived directly from the text. With power finally devolved, the real question is, will state governors step up and treat a life in their remotest ward as equal to a life in Asarak? It is the ultimate test of localized accountability. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.